Hey friends, thanks so much for joining us. This is Sean from SGT Report, and on the line right now I have Dr. Mark Sircus, whose website is drsircus.com. Dr. Sircus, thanks for joining us.
Oh, pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and I read and we posted your article, Why Do People Die from Viruses? Obviously, Ebola has taken control of the news cycle at this point. But number one, I just want to address the fact that I recognize that this could be a wag the dog moment in American history. Ebola is taking the headlines, and so now we're not really focusing on dropping bombs on Syria or any of the other crimes about which we should all be aware and focused. I also fear that perhaps Ebola has been weaponized, with the CDC owning 70 Ebola patents. My question is why? I'm also aware of the vaccine agenda. GlaxoSmithKline is rushing out work on their vaccine for Ebola. I think Red Pill Revolution's video, The Ebola Deception Vaccine Agenda Fully Exposed, is very well done, and I invite you all to watch it. Dr. Sircus, again, I want to thank you for joining us, and I just would love to get your opinion on Ebola. And first, I guess we should ask for your background and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm from New York, but I've been down in Brazil for 22 years. I was one of the first nationally certified acupuncturists in the United States. But when I set up shop in New Hampshire, the medical board went after me for practicing medicine, which acupuncture is, Chinese medicine, practicing medicine without a license. And that kind of bumped me out of the States eventually. And I've been down here 22 years. I started the International Medical Veritas Association 10 years ago. And our original work was about vaccines. We came out with a book on vaccines. It's now called The Terror of Pediatric Medicine. And yes, the whole medical system, or the CDC, their basic modus operandi is sell vaccines to promote and protect the vaccine industry, and which is a very cruel industry with cruel beginnings and quite a bit of insanity attached to it, like injecting mercury into children. So I don't trust them and never have. My official statement is, as far as I can spit into a hurricane wind. Ebola, I'm the only doctor in the world who's written a book and published a book already on Ebola, coming up with intelligent treatment approaches. It's a real mess. No matter which way you look at this, it's kind of terrible. And whether the actual virus is really real or is natural or not, or bioengineered and deliberately being put out there, just what the media is doing and just what the medical system is doing is threatening society. We had one case come into the United States, and the effect, it's turned the Dallas hospital into a ghost town.
Right.
We had a panic, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, in the Pentagon's parking lot. We now have a czar elected by the president, appointed by the president, who knows nothing about Ebola. You have the military involved in the vaccines. And just to give some people some good news, out of Africa itself and from the World Health Organization is reporting actually decline in the epidemic, meaning as of the end of September, we had 3 weeks of decline, and yet, of course, it's the end of the world if you read the press.
Correct.
So there's your original question about why do people die from viruses is a good thing to hang our coat on for a bit. First, understanding that whatever they're panicking people about Ebola, the Department of Health and Human Services is predicting 50 million deaths from the influenza epidemic that hasn't started yet, but that's supposed to roll out very soon.
That's right.
So, nobody's predicting 50 million deaths from Ebola, though a couple of hundred cases in the West could just, really wreck society and the medical systems, which are not prepared for this at all. But so we need to really talk about viruses in general. I mean, we've had AIDS and we have the bird flu and the regular influenza and even the common cold virus this year is killing kids.
That's right. Well, if I may, let me jump in. You mentioned the Pentagon incident, which was reported on Friday. And here's the problem. None of us really know what to believe coming out of this government anymore in the mainstream Mockingbird media because we cannot trust them, and that's on record. Okay, why do I say that? Well, because on July 15th, 2013, RT and many other news media sites reported that the U.S. ended its ban on using domestic propaganda against the people. Well, what is domestic propaganda? It's Psy Ops, right? It's psychological operations against a group of people. Previously, the United States government could only use Psy Ops and propaganda outside of the borders of this country because the government was the people, represented the people. That no longer is the case. And so this criminal government has given itself permission to use propaganda domestically. That's Psy Ops. So we don't know what to believe. And in the case of that Pentagon incident, I'm hearing reports that that woman was a PR person. And in addition to that, she said she had just recently visited Africa, to which her PR firm said, no, that's not true. She did not. So we don't even know what's going on. And to your point, is Ebola even real? Sure, we know it's been real in Africa. We know it's really killing people. But is what's happening in this country real? Was the Thomas Duncan situation real? Did he have Ebola? Did he have something else? Did he actually infect two other people? Or is that propaganda, two other nurses that gave him care? We have probably way more questions than we have answers. But this government and the Mockingbird media is instituting one heck of a lot of fear in the people because, again, this thing has dominated the news cycle now for weeks. So I guess the question for you, Doc, is how do people protect themselves? I know in your article, Why Do People Die from Viruses, you talk about oxygenating the blood, how important that is, hydration, nutrition, vitamin D. Sodium bicarbonate can help increase oxygen levels. Should we talk about nanosilver? What are some of the things people can do to ensure good health with or without Ebola being a problem in our nation?
Well, let's answer the question why people die when they have a virus. Do they die from the virus or they die from something else? And no matter what kind of virus we have, the thing that really kicks people in is actually the chemical toxicity, heavy metal toxicity, radiation exposure that's building up in the body, and the great holes we have in the cells from very severe nutritional deficiencies. The body was never designed to stand up to stress under those conditions. We weren't evolved that way, to be poisoned and to live. Normally, when people used to use poison in the old days, you kill people with poison. Well, today, the whole public is poisoned, but we never, ever, ever hear that somebody dies of poison. Not really. It doesn't hit the news. Also, you never, ever, ever hear that this gentleman died of a magnesium deficiency.
Right.
The one that just had an attack, a cardiac arrest. Yet, almost every person who dies of a heart attack also has magnesium deficiencies.
Yeah, I'm nodding because I read that in your article. It really resonated with me because I take magnesium supplements, vitamin D, vitamin C. So many of the people I know don't, and they're unhealthy, they're depressed, they don't know why, they're going to doctors, they're getting medications from Big Pharma.
If parents are concerned about this year's influenza epidemic, or the child getting a common cold, or Ebola coming down the block for some reason.
Just get the flu shot, right, Doc?
No. Well, if you want to increase as far as I'm concerned, increase your chance of dying from the flu, get your flu shot.
Well, get your mercury levels up.
Right, get your mercury levels up, and sure. So basically, the body, when it gets sick, when it has all these chemical, exposures, when it has more radiation, which we're getting from Fukushima, they're not screaming on the news, Fukushima, it's coming, it's been polluting the North America for 3.5 years. They don't talk about that. So yes, they are lying. we have to, there are certain things we have to, well, it's walk a tightrope. We know they're lying. How much are they lie? Is it 100% lie? Is it a 50% lie? We know it's always a lie and they're never telling the total truth.
That's right.
So it's difficult and they create stress and confusion, and that's part of the problem. But if, in terms of any virus coming to get you, one way or another, it's like a wake up call. You better start taking care of yourself now. The flu comes, or any virus will come quicker and attack harder to anybody who's vulnerable because they're already super toxic or super weak from lacking basic nutritional items like selenium and magnesium or bicarbonate even. People who have acid blood. All these sicknesses that we have already, even though we're walking around, going to school or going to work, we're already sick. And people don't realize that, and they're not even worried about it until they get the flu or until they get something. And that is the reason why we get something. We get the flu because we're already sick. We don't get viral infections too much. You don't see really healthy people getting the flu.
Right.
Some people just don't get it because they really are taking care of themselves.
Well, my friend and his family a couple years back, they all got the flu shot. I warned him not to do it. He got the flu shot for him and his family, and everybody, his wife, his two kids, all got as sick as they've ever been from the flu.
Yeah.
And, I pointed that out without saying I told you so, but it's like, what is it going to take for people to, wake up? And my fear as it relates to Ebola, I mentioned earlier in the interview that I have a fear that it's been weaponized. Well, how can I say that as a responsible journalist, someone might ask? Well, I would like to point out that after the 9/11 attacks, there was an anthrax attack that rolled out on Congress. And later it was proven that weapons-grade form of anthrax tracked back to Fort Detrick in Maryland. It wasn't something Osama bin Laden and his cohorts could have gotten themselves, and it's cause for concern because now we see these human trials for Ebola rolling out with another company. Human trials just started, I think, last week. And where are those trials taking place? In Maryland. I'm just so concerned about what we're seeing because even if you take steps to secure your health through proper nutrition and all the things that you talk about, what do you think the agenda is here with Ebola? Do you think the agenda is ultimately a vaccine agenda? The agenda is to scare people enough to roll out a vaccine that may cause way more damage?
No doubt. No doubt. That's their business. That's the business of the CDC. That's their business. This is their paradigm. And of course, they're saying very publicly, different people, that, this is not going to get under control unless, we bring out a vaccine. But they're not going to bring out a tested, safe vaccine. First, vaccines are not safe. There are no safe vaccines. They all kill people. They all create side effects and complications.
Right.
All of them.
So somebody who's new to this is listening saying, you people are tinfoil hat wearing nuts. Okay, well, Google information about the HPV vaccine. The Merck HPV vaccine killed people in trials. It got approved, and it's done lots of damage to little girls and women since. Take a look at the mercury issue and the autism issue and the cover-up by I think the CDC themselves covering up the autism link of mercury in the vaccines causing autism in I think it's the MMR vaccine. Isn't that just all recent news? I mean,
all recent news.
This is real stuff. This is really important. When you say that there are no safe vaccines, I'm nodding my head. Of course, people can't see me and they can't see you, but I'm nodding my head in agreement because we know that they're jacked full of mercury and formaldehyde and aluminum and aspartame and all sorts of horrible, like a horror concoction. If you imagined a witch on Halloween brewing something in her big black kettle to pass out to the kids, which would kill them or dumb them down or make them sick, it's what goes into vaccines. It's absolutely horrific. Well, I guess we're both on the same page. My fear is that this is all part of a vaccine agenda, and the really dark part is what's in the vaccine and what is the ultimate agenda. Is it population reduction? Is it just dumbing people down? What is it? Is it healthcare tyranny so they can lock down the country in the name of martial law? What is the ultimate agenda here?
Well, it's very interesting that, we're just about to go into the greatest economic and financial collapse the world has ever seen.
That's right.
And America is sitting up there on like a pedestal and has a long way to fall. And the best way for a government to control a population that is whose society is being basically broken apart or destroyed is either war or this is really beautiful setup. Something like Ebola, the army and the government can declare a national emergency, and then they have a way to control the populations, which are freaking out because the stock market is crashing, the banks are closing, everybody's going bankrupt. I mean, it could get so bad and nasty, and the timing is so, here it is. We're who knows, weeks or months away from this financial and economic calamity. And so I think this is really good cover. It doesn't seem like they're able to start a good enough war that distracts people enough.
Yeah. And they're getting resistance from China and Russia, the BRICS. They're getting international resistance to their monolithic debt-based Ponzi scheme, which is imploding. And to back you up, I 100% agree, because we know in Connecticut, Governor Dan Malloy has declared a public health emergency over Ebola and essentially suspended civil rights whenever he wants them suspended, without a single Ebola case having appeared in Connecticut. Now, keep in mind, Connecticut is the same state where Sandy Hook happened, and that's the source of so much of the gun grab legislation coming out of Connecticut. That's the source of so much tyranny towards our Second Amendment rights. Folks, we're awake and aware, and clearly, Dr. Sircus is awake and aware to be talking about these things. And rational people talk about these things. We're not taking the Orwellian Kool-Aid, right? Ignorance is not strength. And that's why we're having this conversation, because we can see what's happening here. And I think you're absolutely right to talk about the economic collapse, because what better way to control a population who otherwise would be damn angry and in the streets and uncontrollable than to tell them, just bunker down in your homes so you don't get Ebola and your family doesn't die.
Right. I don't know if they're going to get away with it, because everything's happening. Everything is so public today. And all this Ebola is coming from every side, and everybody's putting in their say. And if all of a sudden the cases start going down in Africa, then it's going to be harder for them to sustain a panic in the West. They'll look with just one or two or three patients. I mean, it's pretty crazy. The whole thing is pretty, and the way they treat Ebola. I mean, they just publicly say we have no treatment, and yet it would cost $500,000 a patient in the United States to treat one. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's crazy that they're bringing them here too. Obama is now. It's been uncovered by Judicial Watch that he wants to bring non-American citizens here for Ebola treatment.
Just the fact that they're doing that and want to do that, and they haven't brought the planes to a standstill from the infected regions. Right. This is already weaponization. Who is so good? I'd like to meet President Obama or any of these people who are so good that they want to risk. They want to go save people in Africa and risk the United States at the same time. This is a betrayal. The head of the CDC, and I titled my essay 2 days ago, I think is a traitor. Oh, we can't shut the air traffic down because then we can't get personnel there and get supplies over to Africa. We really need to save and help these people. I don't believe any of these people. Anybody who would vaccinate a kid, a 6-month-old baby with mercury, is going to be a good person. And want to do something for a good reason. And the other doctors already said, well, you don't have to have commercial flights. You can have the military fly these things in and out. Yeah. So they're just pulling. They're either showing us how stupid and ignorant they are, how much they themselves are fooled by the present paradigms and all the lies in the press and the government, and that's really comes down to you're either a person who trusts doctors, trusts the CDC, trusts the FDA, trusts the government, is a good government, really interested in the people, or no. And
No.
the government is really a slave to commercial interests and the big banks and the big press who are owned by the richest people in the world. It's most people are caught in between.
Hmm.
But as I say, the Ebola is it's dynamite. It's a mess. It's supposedly a very potent virus. But can we really trust them on that? I,
No.
I, I
No. And it's impossible to trust them on that any more than it's possible to trust them on their lies about going to war in Afghanistan or Iraq, or we got
oh
hit
yeah,
hard on 9/11 by Osama bin Laden and 19 guys with box cutters all under the control of a man in a cave who got NORAD to stand down, etc., etc. It's
oh right.
impossible to trust somebody who says we need to go into Syria and bomb and bomb children to save the children. It's impossible to believe them. No, I think what they're doing is they're demonstrating their contempt for the American people, because the American people at large are going to be afraid of this and are going to buy the propaganda that's coming out of the propaganda mockingbird media. And that's really scary, because at the end of the day, how do free people remain free when they're controlled, tyrannically and fascistly controlled, by a government that is no longer a government by and for the people? It's not a government that has the best interests of the American people at heart. But the American people, by and large, the sheeple, still believe that that's true. And that's the greatest deceit of all. These are people who are now completely controllable because of their ignorance. They're completely controllable because of their willful ignorance. Because the things we're talking about, I'm not a rocket scientist. I don't have an IQ of 180, and I figured this stuff out. You figured this stuff out. Our listeners have figured this stuff out. And that's the scariest part. We can't figure out why 90% of the rest of the population in this country can't figure this stuff out, because all you need to do is scratch a little bit below the surface and the whole bucket of lies becomes visible.
Most people are just not interested in facing the truth. So let's talk about something we can trust, which is something they don't tell you about. Let's just talk about, forget about the thousands of chemicals that people are exposed to in the drinking water. Fukushima. Some people are talking about Fukushima, and I've written about 50 essays on it in these last 3.5 years. This is a some people basically saying it's a world extinction event. Why? Because it's never going to be put under control. It's polluting the whole northern Pacific already. They don't talk about it. They don't warn anybody about it. They didn't tell anybody that when the place exploded 3.5 years ago, it put out massive amounts of radiation, specifically for instance radioactive iodine. And when Dr. David Brownstein in Detroit tested 5,000 of his patients for iodine deficiencies, and 95% were deficient in iodine. So let's say 80% of the American population, let's just be safe, 80% are deficient in iodine. When you're deficient in iodine, your thyroid is the sponge for the radioactive type. Does the government, is it even warning anybody about this? No. If 50 million people are going to get the flu this year, why are they going to get the flu? I haven't heard anybody said that there's a new flu virus that is, 100 times or 1,000 times more nasty. But we do know radiation is continuing. It's accumulating in people. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. People are getting more toxic exposure, and a lot of them are going to come down with the flu. Now, everybody knows the flu exists. Now, what the flu actually is it chemical toxicity coming out, or is it actually a virus, or both? Almost everybody's had the flu sometime, so we know that exists. It's, this whole scare, or maybe the point of this program, is that they're not telling you what to do. They're telling you that they don't know what they're doing. Their hospitals don't know what they're doing. They specifically don't have any medication or vaccine for this, and they're not going to have one, at least not one that's proven to deal with Ebola.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do know is that we are under tremendous stress. Plus, all this new fear about Ebola is more stress financially. It's like an avalanche coming down on people. So we do need to if we want to be intelligent, to be proactive, to start distressing a little bit, taking some things that will help us do that. Sodium bicarbonate. Everybody can go run out to the supermarket and get sodium bicarbonate. Nothing is cheaper and faster in terms of saving a life if you really have a bad flu.
And how do you take that? What is the mechanism for taking it? In a glass of water, and how much do you
Yeah,
take?
you can take first of all, sodium bicarbonate is used in emergency rooms and intensive care wards and can save a life in
And
seconds.
that's baking soda, right, Doc?
That's baking soda.
Hmm.
Why it works is because it neutralizes acid instantly. And another way of saying that is it increases oxygen instantly. Of course, that's what they use to treat Ebola. They give more oxygen. You can get more oxygen just by taking sodium bicarbonate. You can take it in water. You can put honey in it. You can put blackstrap molasses in it. You can put lemon in it. And why it works, and in 1918, it saved a lot of lives from the Spanish flu, and that was published by the Arm& Hammer's Baking Soda Company in 1926. Doctors who used it, saved lives. And what happens? You take it and it instantly turns to carbon dioxide in the stomach. This gas that they want to tax the public on, and that they're lying and telling people that it's global warming because of increased CO2. That's a total lie. Total lie. When we're actually going through global cooling, the sun's activity is diminishing very quickly. It's going to get cold. This winter is going to be cold. So, going back, bicarbonate turns into carbon dioxide in the stomach, and that drives bicarbonate into the bloodstream, reducing acid. The blood vessels are sensitive to carbon dioxide levels, this evil gas, which is actually a food. You put it in, the more of it into the bloodstream, and the arteries and veins dilate, letting more blood flow, more oxygen get delivered. Also, it increases and changes the oxygen dissociation curve. As we get lower CO2, we get sicker because we have less oxygen. So I'm the only doctor in the world who's written a book on sodium bicarbonate. It's been published in New York about 6 months ago. It's the first thing you can clean. The Army knew 20 years ago you can clear the kidneys of uranium toxicity.
Hmm.
So people who are toxic of chemicals, heavy metals, or radiation will get some relief from that if they drink sodium bicarbonate or jump into a bath. You can put it into a bath, like half a pound, 2 pounds, up to 3 pounds in a bath of sodium bicarbonate.
What would be the ingestible dose for, say, a 180-pound man who had the flu?
That is right on the Arm& Hammer's box. The 7 half teaspoons for a large adult is the maximum dose, which can be taken for about 2 weeks. And that is the dose you probably would use for cancer, for a full-grown person, or for somebody who gets a bad viral infection.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
the bottom line for somebody who wants to use it correctly is they need to go out and buy pH paper, and you take enough sodium bicarbonate to get your morning urinary pH up to 8, whether you're treating cancer or you're treating a flu or you're treating Ebola.
Okay.
So if you're a child, of course, you're going to take a lot less. Some people are so acid they can, really need to take a lot, and the pH paper will tell you that.
Okay.
Well,
Well, let's sum up for our listeners, and let's end this on a good note as it pertains to our own individual health and the health of our families. Again, earlier in the interview, I mentioned after having read your article, Why Do People Die from Viruses? It's because of a situation generally with most people of dis-ease. Their body is in a condition of dis-ease. They have disease because they're not healthy. They don't have enough oxygen in their blood. They're not hydrated enough. They don't have good, sound nutrition. Maybe their vitamin D and vitamin C levels are low. Maybe magnesium levels are low. What can people listening do to help make sure that they are the least susceptible in our population to viruses, be it the flu, Ebola, or otherwise? Can you touch on nanosilver as well, if you have any opinions on that?
My opinion, don't have too much direct experience with it. My opinion is once you have a virus or an infection, it'll help. I'm not going to say more than that. It's for sure there's enough evidence to long period of many people using it that has an antiviral and antibacterial aspects to it. But it's not something that's going to help prevent or something you would want to take all the time because it's not natural to the body. You would be loading up on magnesium, on iodine, on selenium, which is very important for Ebola, selenium and vitamin C because of the way the virus strips the body of vitamin C and gives the immune system a really hard time. Selenium is wonderful for that. Um, these basic elements, having a biomat, I, I would never want to have a flu of any kind without having a far infrared mattress or what is called a biomat. You just, instead of going into a far infrared sauna, you just lay on these mattresses. When you get the flu, oh my God. I mean, in terms of the kind of relief, the misery. Also, with global cooling coming, these kind of mattresses, you heat your body at night, you sleep with it on, and you can turn down the heat in the house, so they save money and keep you warm when it gets really cold, unless, of course, we lose the power. There are many things. I have a book on Ebola. You can see it on drsircus.com. It's drsircus.com. Also, if somebody just looks back these last 2 weeks, I've published, a lot of the chapters from the book are just sitting there on my site, ready to be read for free. My recommendations to create a home treatment center, which doesn't matter what if you get the Ebola, are you going to go to a hospital, go to a public place with Ebola? Whatever happens to the family today, we have to take care of ourselves at home. Who are we going to trust? We're going to have to trust ourselves by educating ourselves, by arming ourselves with the right nutritional items, which are medicines in the emergency room. Magnesium chloride or magnesium sulfate, it's injectable. Selenium is injectable. Sodium bicarbonate is injectable. You can use these at high dosages at home. And set up your own emergency department or intensive care ward. You'll do better at home than you'll do in any clinic because first they'll bankrupt you if you have any money. Imagine $500,000 for no treatment, for them to just give you IVs to keep you hydrated, to give you a little bit of oxygen in a very lame way. They won't give you bicarbonate. They won't give you magnesium. They won't give you vitamin C. So then you want to increase your chance of not dying. You got to be intelligent.
Yeah. For anybody who doubts that, we invite you to examine the history of the Rockefellers, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, and their relationship to and support of the American Medical Association, the AMA. I think you mentioned just shortly ago in this interview, who can you trust? Who are you going to trust when you get sick? I'm not here to give medical advice, but I can tell you this. If you're going to trust Big Pharma and you're going to trust the Rockefeller big medicine industrial complex, you're turning your life and the well-being of those you love over to people who may not have your best interest at heart, and that is the bottom line. Again, we invite you to examine the history of the AMA and the Rockefellers. Our guest has been Dr. Mark Sircus, whose website you can visit, and we encourage you to visit, is drsircus.com. Doc, before we let you go, can you tell us a little bit about your website and how people can find your good work every day?
Well, it's my website is very well organized to get a lot of free information. Right at the top, underneath the IMVA banner, is a link to my protocol, which kind of outlines how the structure of the natural allopathic protocol. That's the name of my medical approach, by the way, natural allopathic medicine. On the top right, you'll see a menu item where you can click and go to cancer or magnesium or iodine or bicarbonate. I have all these categories. So you can go to a page where I'll list my articles on each of those subjects. Literally, it would take somebody reading probably 4 or 5 hours a day over a year to read my site. I have about 15 books. 6 months ago, I published a compendium on cancer. It's 2,500 pages. So I have a wealth of information, a lot of which I give away. So people can just go and really fill themselves up without having to spend a dime.
Yep.
And the very core of my protocol is very inexpensive. These items, magnesium chloride, iodine, selenium, and sodium bicarbonate together. I mean, that's just the core of the protocol. But these emergency room medicines, when taken orally, are very inexpensive. Stock up on now. You don't have to wait until, if you wait until Ebola is already striking your neighborhood, you're waiting too long and you're going to be a sitting duck. My work is very different. Even in the alternative community, I've organized the most powerful, safe substances that exist and organize them into a protocol that is easy to learn at home, even if you're treating cancer. Includes medical marijuana, which of course is growing in leaps and bounds in terms of national interest or even international interest. It's one of the best chemotherapy agents. I even have a link open on my browser. There's even a doctor claiming that medical marijuana will help with Ebola because it's an anti-inflammatory and it will help regulate the immune system's response. So there are a lot of intelligent things that are very easy for people to learn about. They just have to read.
That's right. And listen to valuable interviews with valuable information like this one and share it with those you care about. Share it with your friends. Share it with your family. Even if they're sheeple people, there may be things in this interview that resonate with them because this is all common sense stuff. The good doctor, and I have been talking about things that are very common sense. And for those of you who want to learn more about nanosilver, check out the comments below. We have very informed readers at SGT Report who will be more than willing to share great links about more information on nanosilver, vitamin C, vitamin D, and some of these other things that the doctor and I have been talking about. And please do visit drsircus.com. That's DR, and then Sircus is spelled SIRCUS, drsircus.com, for all of the wonderful free information that Dr. Mark Sircus has just told you about. Well, Doc, I didn't know you were offshore. It's really nice to have met your acquaintance. I really appreciate your time today.
Well, it's been my pleasure.
All right, thanks for being a part of it. And guys, thanks so much to you for tuning in. Thanks for sharing this information with others. And thanks for supporting us at sgtreport.com. Have a great week.